Welcome back to the Chainsaw Man Comparison series. Today we'll cover episode 2, which adapts parts of chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and chapter 5. Quite the departure from last episode, but keep in mind that these chapters are all much shorter, and there's a good amount of it that the anime skips over. On top of which, a lot of lines have also been relocated, even right at the beginning of the episode. Right after Denji said his stomach was growling, instead of Makima immediately saying that they should go and get something to eat like in the manga, she now asks him what his name is. Something that she doesn't ask until page 5 of chapter 2 when they're already at the udon stand. It's also said under much different circumstances because, as it turns out, there's an entire manga exclusive rescue mission that gets triggered right here, and that's why Makima asks Denji's name at this point, because she wants to command him to rescue the girl that was apparently kidnapped by a devil. Naturally, Denji was kind of opposed to this, seeing as he was about to experience udon for the first time, but he's convinced otherwise when Makima says her lines about not needing a pet that says no to its owner, something she says in the anime immediately after Denji gives his name to her while they're still in the car. In both versions, Denji still gets slightly annoyed that he's being treated like a dog afterwards, but for the manga he ruminates about this on his way to rescue the girl, as well as remind himself that Pochita is sadly no longer in his life, as far as he's aware. It's after that that the anime makes Denji's stomach growl a second time, signaling Makima to finally say her lines about stopping to get something to eat, causing Denji to be floored at the fact that someone would pay for his meal and give them a coat on top of that. I think this is the moment that Denji truly fell in love with Makima, and while he revels at his new girlfriend, this is where we'll get into the opening. And once the opening ends, we can see that they're already at the rest stop, where we can now see Denji and Makima at the takeout window. Up close, we can still see how Denji ecstatically orders his udon and sausage, but we also now get to hear Makima's order as well, since, you know, in the manga she was kinda cut off by that bloody guy coming in. This marks the beginning of that manga-only mission, so before I continue on with the anime's line of events, let's quickly summarize this event first, because I seriously doubt it'll ever get adapted properly due to when and where it takes place, but nonetheless, if you'd like to read this part for yourself without me spoiling it, or have already read it in the first place, then I'll leave a timestamp for when the comparison will continue. So, to summarize, after one of Makima's associates basically accepts the job on Denji's behalf, Denji gets that little talk about disobedient dogs and the like, and then he's off to the forest where he starts having second doubts about the whole thing, as well as how he misses his best friend. It's while he's mourning Pochita that he hears some laughter in the distance, and upon further inspection, he finds a girl that's playing with a devil. Once the girl notices Denji, she immediately goes to shield the devil, saying that the devil was actually the one that saved her from her father, who was allegedly hitting her in the parking lot. And Denji, who knew the pain of losing a devil friend, naturally grew hesitant to kill this devil like he was ordered, instead actually offering to run away with this girl and her devil despite the repercussions. That's just how much he loved Pochita, even if it meant throwing out his perfect chance for a better life. It was a promise that he wasn't exactly thrilled about, but just when you think that this story was about to go in a completely different direction, the girl's laughing starts to get more creepy over time until we discover that the devil was actually controlling her all along, trying to get on Denji's good side so it could either get him to go away or control him as well. It's upon realizing this that Denji understandably snapped and pulled his cord for the second time now, summoning a chainsaw right where the devil was grabbing him, and right after breaking free, made quick work of the muscle devil. After that, Denji carried the girl back to the rest stop where Makima was enjoying a corn dog, and an ambulance was brought in to care for the girl. This whole event seemed to take a lot out of Denji, because right afterwards he plopped right over into Makima, something that would happen in the anime anyways, but with the excuse of him feeling faint after fighting the zombie devil from the last episode. Also, this time he falls over while talking about the curry that Makima just ordered, and since they're still in front of the takeout window in the anime, one of Makima's associates now walks up to the window to pay for the food, while Denji revels in his newest experience. Before he fully faints though, he explains to Makima about how his devil pet merged itself with his heart while the manga-only ambulance takes off in the background. And just like that girl he saved, Makima assures Denji that she's positive Pochita is still alive within him, thanks to her particularly keen sense of smell. Of course, hearing this is a giant weight off Denji's shoulders and causes all of his exhaustion to hit him at once. Though he doesn't actually pass out in the manga, he just sort of wobbles around a bit. I imagine he passes out in the anime alone for time to pass by a little bit, since his udon is still supposed to be kind of soggy by the time he wakes up and frantically looks for his meal. After he asks if he's allowed to eat it, that's when we sync back up with the manga, where Makima asks Denji if he can feed himself. And the answer to that in both versions is a glorious and unresounding no. These two are certainly developing an interesting relationship already, and that's even before Denji learned what Makima's name was. This girl can be kinda hard to read at times, but it's faces like this that never made it into the anime that make you know that she knows what she's doing. Even after she feeds Denji a little more in the anime, she has the perfect answer for the question that Denji presents her with afterwards. And the answer to what kind of guy is her type is the boy that's sitting right across from her. Or sitting right next to her, depending on which one you look at. It's this starstruck sight that'll be what ends out Chapter 2, so without skipping a beat, let's continue on with Chapter 3, where Denji is still processing what he just heard without even realizing that they've already arrived at Devil Hunter HQ. Throughout the quick tour of this place, where we actually get to ride the elevator this time, Makima is giving us a lot of good information about how Devil Hunter life is, but Denji's mind is still in a different dimension altogether. Once his name is called though, he snaps out of it and, like the good boy he is, puts on his new uniform before meeting another Devil Hunter. We'll talk about that guy in just a second, but before that I must say it's interesting how Denji's tie is fully fixed up in the manga. I seriously doubt he did that on his own. Maybe Makima did it between panels, or maybe it's just a clip-on, who knows, but whether he can fit the attire or not, he's about to get thrown into the professional world of devil hunting, and Aki Hayasaka here will be the one responsible for showing him the ropes. Much to the dismay of Denji, who was hoping to stick around with Makima for the rest of his life. Even when getting pulled by the collar, he still gravitates towards Makima like a lost puppy. The anime even had him fall to the ground off screen this time while Aki demands Denji to get up. But Denji won't listen to anyone other than his rightful owner, so she walks up to him and gives him a bit of incentive to hang in there for the time being, this time while fixing up that tie. What an extremely meticulous cut. You could put it on a how-to video and it would do the job. Moving on though, now we're on the streets again for some devil surveillance work. Something that doesn't last too long, because after Aki hears Makima's name being mentioned one too many times, it's off to the alleyway for a little bit of rookie punishment. Denji really didn't make a good first impression on this guy, so Aki left an impression of his own on Denji's face, and even added an extra kick into the mix this time. On the surface level, Denji kinda puts off the vibe of a womanizer, but that's not really the whole story. We all know that Denji is just trying to make up for lost time. But from the perspective of Aki, he's known Makima for a good amount of time, so seeing this random unrefined dude enter his line of work and immediately start clinging to his senpai would be seen as a major disrespect for anyone that was in his shoes. So he pays back that disrespect in kind, and in a pretty badass way I might add. This guy's got the skill of a marksman. But right before Aki makes it out of the alleyway, little did he realize that the trash he just took out grew legs and used those legs to partake in an activity that not even the most notorious of street thugs would resort to. I think Denji gets an exception though, he's actually lost a nut before. Still, I have to wonder if this guy will be able to have any kids at all after this barrage of low blows. Even if Aki was able to sense some sort of resolve from Denji, I don't think he was expecting a comeback that warrants this. When it comes to fighting other guys, Denji has no problems fighting dirty. He's pretty unhinged in that regard, but I'd say it's all in the name of fulfilling his dreams. I think. I don't know, it's kinda hard to accept this little speech of his after getting kicked in the gonads one too many times. It's actually insanely impressive how this guy even managed to get back up and attack at all. That takes a lot of willpower. After he throws that punch, this would normally be when Denji goes in for another low blow, but the anime holds off on that for a bit so that Aki can squeak out his lines of disapproval and Denji can accuse him for having the hots for Makima as well. Once Denji's done with that retort, that's when Mappa has him execute his final killing blow and Aki comes crumbling down to the ground. Seriously, he needs to get better at guarding that area. Maybe learn to fight the same way Taro from Mob Psycho does. I'd imagine that explaining this situation to the girl that you want to get together with must be pretty awkward, even if she doesn't really care one way or the other. Regardless of their obvious disdain for one another, she just figures it'll work out anyways, and even goes so far to put them on the same team. Naturally, Aki is confused as to what makes Denji so special, and learns that it's because this guy can turn into a devil whenever he wants. However, that also means he'll be constricted to this institution for the rest of his life. I like the little cutout version of Denji we see in the manga once he realizes this. Stuff like this isn't in the anime, and that's probably because it would clash with the more grounded aesthetic that Mappa's going for. As far as the background design goes though, Mappa has been extremely faithful to Fujimoto-san's detailing. It's scarily accurate, right down to the katakana that litters the signs. Honestly, I'm kinda surprised Denji isn't more dumbstruck by the city life here. Just like when he was following Makima at the beginning of the chapter, his mind is still elsewhere, despite nearly being lost in the crowd when openly declaring his desire for another hug from Makima. Something that Aki humorously got to hear when being right next to Denji this time, as a nearby truck flushes out the frame and our coverage of Chapter 3. So now we'll move on to Chapter 4, where Aki is learning to cope with his new roommate. As if he already didn't hate the guy enough, now he's pilfering his ingredients to make a Frankenstein bread. This is why you choose your roommates carefully, folks. Before you know it, they're making messes, singing in the bathtub through thin walls with varying lyrics, and even passing out on the toilet when you need to go. And to top it all off, he didn't even replace the toilet roll, a sin that the anime alone shows us. Poor Aki. And keep in mind, he still needs to deal with him tomorrow too, as we transition to their next devil hunting job in a fiend cordoned off house. Once again, the background art here is spot on, with only slight revisions, such as adding in more people, downgrading the car, and adding in a small wash area, and so on and so forth, but that's neither here nor there. The important part is how our newly built tag team of devil hunters will operate within this devil-infested house, where Aki learns that Denji doesn't even know what a fiend is to begin with. Actually, in the manga, he finds this out before they even entered the house to begin with, and when they finally do enter the house, it seems like Aki's got his sword at the ready in that version, all the way up to when he kicks in the door where the fiend resides. Why would he need his sword after all? This fiend is Denji's test of initiation, and it's also a good opportunity for him to demonstrate his devil-wielding prowess. But little did Aki know that Denji already has plenty of experience without those abilities. He didn't even need to kick it after decapitating it like he did in the manga. Naturally, Aki is curious as to why Denji didn't transform, and Denji gives a pretty solid reason, but it's one that's a little too mercy-filled for Aki's liking, especially since we just found out that his whole family got killed by devils. Denji doesn't exactly refute Aki's hatred for devils, but he does make it obvious that he doesn't see it that way. He wouldn't mind being friends with the devil. He's done it before. The differences in experiences are just too different between these two, and moments like this make you realize how interesting their character dynamic will be in the future. But as sound as Denji's initial reasoning was, the truth of the matter was that it was a far more superficial reason to begin with. So it was a mercy kill with a sprinkle of selfishness added in, but still probably a more humane death for this thing than Aki would have offered. That little interaction that they just had made it pretty easy for Denji to figure out that Aki's true goal in life was something revenge related. He could be wrong about that, but for himself at least, Denji is pretty confident in his own life goals, especially now that he's come to the conclusion that he wants to pursue a goal that he had originally given up on, and that is the desire to fondle. It may be a tad perverted, but hey, if he's able to get consent, then he may have just found something to get serious about. Regardless of what other people think, Denji sure is passionate about this perverse goal of his, and even brings his desires into the next scene as Aki and him are giving the report to Makima. Though maybe not as much as the manga, because there are some boob desire lines here that are left out. Probably because he's about to get introduced to another major addition to the cast. Like the trailer, the appearance of Power is still just as strong as ever, and I love how we get such exemplary camera work detailing her character design as a whole, while paying mind to the little poses that she does in the manga. The anime did remove her following line about how she knew about getting a buddy ahead of time, but every other retort from Denji is still kept in check. From his confusion all the way down to his horniness. The sight of Aki's disapproving look at Denji will be what ends out Chapter 4. So now let's move on to the last chapter of this episode, Chapter 5. But not on page 1. That's right, we have some more line mix-arounds to talk about. See, the beginning of Chapter 5 starts with Denji surveying the area with Power, and has intermittent flashbacks of everything else Makima said before they took off, but the anime decides that they'll just knock out some of Makima's lines now before the scene transitions. Like how she compliments Power's high mental faculties on page 3, or how she reminds her and Denji that they have a lot to live up to on page 4. Every other line by Makima still does come after the scene transitions, but one of them is a little out of place. Namely the line where Makima says that Power's horns stick out too much on page 3. Everything else is pretty much in the right place though. Gotta say, Power's inability to stay still really is something else, and I'd say the anime did well at capturing the restlessness of this triple face shot, as well as the literal shot when Power hits Denji out of boredom. Just like Aki, she has no problem mistreating the newbie. Gotta love Denji's blank expression when dealing with things that are annoying. You also gotta love the little foreshadowing that happens in the manga and the anime right afterwards. For you manga-only readers, you know what I mean. Instead of talking about spoilers though, let's talk about Denji's brief interactions with the police and how he was trained to deal with them when approached. And that's to show them the screw-off badge that no longer appears to have Denji's picture housed within. Nonetheless, it still gets the job done, and lets Denji and Power continue to endlessly look for devils with no success. As it turns out, this scarcity might just be due to the scent that Power lets off, and also might be the reason why Aki decided to pair these two up together in the first place, but that's all speculation. Because after all, Power did eventually manage to sniff out a devil that sends her quite literally off the rails. Not right to where the devil is like in the manga, but to another building first that she'll then jump off of to reach the devil. Before we get to that though, I want to quickly mention some slight narrative mix-arounds here, like how Denji comments on Power's speed after she does her war cry this time, or how before she even jumps towards the devil, we now get to see what the devil looks like before anything else. Once that's out of the way, that's when she finally jumps over the railing and readies her weapon Deadman Wonderland style. The key animator really doubled down on the liquefaction of this move, and it's assisted well with extra particles that I assume were added in during post. Altogether, it looks fantastic, and I'm especially keen on the sort of gleamy coloring on the hammer. The manga, on the other hand, almost looks as if it was a wooden hammer that got beamed in from the Matrix. As hilarious as it was to look at the before and after panels of when Power executes her attack, I appreciate how this move was adapted to make it look like it had two impacts. The first one reacted kind of like if you were to hit a water balloon without it breaking, and the second one would be if that water balloon popped under excess pressure. Literally between one frame to the next, this cucumber became a pile of mush, with just a few chunks remaining hitting the window of the telephone booth that this guy is probably lucky that he was behind, lest he end up looking like the demonic woman on the other side of the glass. In my opinion, this looks a lot more gross in the anime. It's not as pasty as the original, and it's much easier to distinguish the entrails. What a strong final panel to adapt the end of the episode. But by no means is it the end of the chapter. We're still only about halfway through chapter 5, but that'll have to wait until next time. For now though, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to give it a like and share it with a friend. Oh, and most importantly, get subscribed for more comparison and breakdown content like this. And as usual, thanks to all my faithful patrons who help keep the dream alive. You guys are amazing. Well, that's it for me. As always, I hope you all have a fantastic day. This is Registry, signing off.